The Last Days and Sad Fate of George Reeves. Sadly, he was only 45. George Reeves was best known for playing the character of Superman, the famous comic book character, in Adventures of Superman, a 1950s television show. While he became a celebrity actor much favored by children in the early days of television, he never quite broke through to the top of the list of charismatic Hollywood actors. He was born George Kiefer Brewer, in Woodstock, Iowa, on January 5, 1914. He was the son of Helen Lesher and Don C. Brewer, a pharmacist. Later, Helen soon divorced Brewer and returned to her hometown of Galesburg with her son. Brewer remained in Iowa where he married another Helen, Helen C. Schultz, about 1925 and had 2 children. Don Brewer died on February 18, 1969 at the age of 79 without seeing his first child, George, again. George and his mother eventually relocated to Pasadena, California, where she married Italian-American Frank Joseph Bisolo. As a result, the 14-year-old took his stepfather's name and became known as George Bisolo. Helen's marriage to Frank, however, did not last. She divorced him in 1932. George became a heavyweight boxer in amateur matches for a time. He later attended Pasadena Junior College where he developed an interest in acting. While studying drama, George performed in many productions at Pasadena Playhouse. It was there that he met actress Eleanora Robinson Needles, who came from a well-known circus family. She was to become his wife. George and Eleanora wed on the evening of September 21, 1940 at the Church of Our Savior in San Marino, California. George's friend and fellow actor, John Wilcox, served as best man. Eleanora's uncle, John Stevens, walked her down the aisle. After a decade of marriage, the couple divorced in October of 1950. They had no children. In 1939, George received his first film credit for his performance in the opening scenes of Gone with the Wind. With his hair dyed a bright red, he portrayed Stuart Tarleton, one of the Tarleton twins who, along with brother Brent, played by Fred Crane, was a suitor of Scarlett O'Hara. George was erroneously listed as Brent Tarleton in the credits and his role was very minor. Nevertheless, his appearance in the epic film provided a boost for his fledgling movie career. At the time, the future certainly looked bright for the handsome young actor, but, as it turned out, stardom would have to wait a while. Soon after being cast in Gone with the Wind, George signed a contract with Warner Brothers Studio. The studio changed his professional surname from Bisolo to the more Hollywood-sounding Reeves. During the early 1940s, while at Warner Brothers, Reeves was given parts in B films and Hopalong Cassidy westerns. In 1942, however, he was cast in the lead male role in So Proudly We Hail, directed by Mark Sandrich. So Proudly We Hail chronicles the experiences of a group of nurses returning from the war in the Philippines. When the film was released in 1943, Reeves won acclaim for his performance as Lieutenant John Summers opposite such prominent female stars as Claudette Colbert, Veronica Lake and Paulette Goddard. With World War II raging, Gerald Gay Reeves was drafted into the U.S. Army in 1943. He served in the Army Air Corps as a member of the Special Theatrical Unit and performed in the U.S. Army Air Force's Broadway show Winged Victory. He then appeared in training and recruiting films such as Last Will and Testament of Tom Smith, 1943. After completing his military service, George returned to Hollywood to resume his film career. After the war, he found it difficult to find leading roles in quality films. He was, however, cast as Sergeant Malin Stark, in the Academy Award-winning blockbuster From Here to Eternity. The classic film was released in 1953, but Reeves' role was only a minor one. With a lack of good film roles, George went to New York in an attempt to find work in the burgeoning television industry. He was offered the part of Superman in a feature film titled Superman and the Mole Men. Superman and the Mole Man served as a vehicle for launching one of the most popular American television shows of the 1950s. At the time, the frustrated actor had no way of knowing that he was headed for TV stardom. The Adventures of Superman, with George Reeves in the title role, began airing in 1952 and ran for 6 seasons, until 1958. During those years, George enjoyed great fame for his portrayal of the Man of Steel, and he was a favorite with children. The syndicated series, sponsored by Kellogg's Cereal, was extremely successful. 104 episodes were produced during its run. By the way, George Reeves and other cast members appeared in commercials for Kellogg's. Reeves appeared as Clark Kent in TV ads for Sugar Frosted Flakes. Prior to the launch of the Superman television series, George Reeves began an affair with ex-Ziegfeld Follies showgirl Toni Mannix, the wife of MGM Studios general manager Edgar Joseph Eddie Mannix. Toni, an actress and dancer in early talking films, was almost 8 years Reeves' senior. Her husband reportedly approved of the relationship. Eddie Mannix, it seems, had a Japanese mistress himself. He was also allegedly linked to the mob. When The Adventures of Superman ended, George Reeves was typecast and had difficulty finding good roles. In 1959, however, his fortunes began to improve, at least on the surface. There were reports that the producers of the Superman series had decided to film another season of the show for syndication, and that filming was to begin in 1960. After breaking off his relationship with Toni Mannix, George had begun a new romance with New York socialite Leonore Lemon. On May 29, 1959, United Press International, UPI, reported in an article titled "Superman Takes a Bride" that George Reeves would soon marry Leonore Lemon. Several sources reported that the wedding was set to take place on June 19, 1959 in Mexico, just 3 days after George's death. Reeves was apparently scheduled on an international tour, including Mexico, to promote another season of The Adventures of Superman, but wedding plans were never officially confirmed. Things seemed to be looking up for George Reeves until tragedy struck. The actor died of a gunshot wound to his head in the upstairs bedroom of his home at 1579 Benedict Canyon Drive in Beverly Hills, a home Toni Mannix had purchased for him. Although his death was officially ruled a suicide, questions remain as to whether he actually took his own life. Was it really suicide, or was the shooting accidental? Was there foul play involved? Was Superman murdered? On the fateful evening of July 15, 1959, George and Leonore and a few guests were partying at George's home until the early hours of the morning. Reeves left the revelers and headed upstairs to his room. A shot rang out and George's body was found sprawled out on his bed. There was no evidence of an intruder or forced entry, and no suicide note was discovered. A drunken Leonore and the inebriated houseguests waited approximately 30 to 45 minutes before calling the police. A high level of alcohol, 0.27%, was found in George's blood, well above the level of intoxication. The alcohol had been combined with painkillers the actor had begun taking after sustaining injuries in a car accident. Over the years, dating back to 1956, George had been involved in a series of car accidents. Those who believe that he was murdered point to the fact that he was involved in an automobile mishap just weeks prior to his death. In a 1989 interview, Leonore Lemon stated that George was a drinker but denied that he was a drug user. She elaborated further by describing him as a social drinker. Leonore stressed that George was not a down person and attributed George's suicide to his inability to get work and not having any hobbies. She declared, "What made him commit suicide was Superman. It's as simple as that. He was just typecast into a thing he couldn't get out of. And he could not work. And that's the whole story." She repeated several times that directors and producers loved him but would not give him roles because of his Superman image. According to Leonore, George had been receiving 10 to 20 strange phone calls per day. She said there was music on the line or the caller just hung up. Although George had changed his phone number, the calls continued. On the night of the tragedy, Both Reeves and Leonore Lemon not only drank heavily but argued openly. According to Lemon, others present in the house at the time of George's death were William Bliss, Carol Van Runkle, the wife of screenwriter Rip Van Runkle, and author Robert Condon. Lenore had neglected to turn the lights out, and when Bliss arrived with Carol Van Runkle, the pair were allowed into the house although Reeves had already gone to bed. Their late arrival disturbed George, who came downstairs and complained about the noise. Lemon admitted that when George stomped back upstairs, she remarked something to the effect of, "Oh, he'll probably go shoot himself now." Rest in peace Superman George Reeves. Goodbye.